Today, we're going to be having a presentation on Citrix Cloud and Microsoft Azure, the next big superhero team up. So we have some esteemed panelists that we're going to be having joining us today. From Microsoft, we have Aaron McKay. Citrix, we have Mike Newberger. And from Genesis 360, we have the famous Laurent. Before we get started, you'll notice in the bottom left, if you're having any issues with the support, the delivery, anything with the Grubhub, just go ahead and give them a phone call, send them an email. Don't put it in the chat. We're not going to be monitoring the chat for Grubhub and lunch showing up. So make sure you go get those for going through the Grubhub components. Before we get started, there are a couple slides that we want to go through before we get to the panel themselves. One of the things that we're seeing across the board is just making sure that there's a clear understanding about where Citrix Cloud and Microsoft Azure partner up together and where they're kind of adding on to each other. And so we wanted to kind of just have a couple of slides to talk about that before we get to the panel. So let's go ahead and get started. Citrix Cloud. So what is it? So if you're not already familiar with Citrix Cloud, I kind of just put this slide together really quickly. Today, you're used to probably setting up Director, licensing, gateway, studio, storefront, workspace, SQL servers. You're used to setting all that up, typically per site, right? So if you have 3 data centers that you own as an organization, you're typically setting up multiple instances of at least of some of these components, or maybe even setting up SQL replication and SQL availability groups. Well, that becomes difficult the more you expand, right? Now you start talking about you're going into the public cloud where there's multiple regions, and now you're setting up some of these components in multiple regions. So it becomes very difficult to scale. So Citrix Cloud basically takes a lot of those concepts and basically delivers those as a management plane. So when you hear the word Citrix Cloud, do not think that this requires you to move your workloads to the cloud. It's an option. In fact, it's a recommended option, but it's not required. And that's usually what I hear from a lot of customers, especially on the management side. As soon as they hear Citrix Cloud, they immediately start thinking, hey, I'm going to be having to move my workloads into the cloud. What that does not necessarily mean that. So it's a pretty big important part. So now that means that now that the management plane is being delivered as a service for you, you can scale the workloads super easy. And you can scale into multiple cloud providers. You can scale to multiple data centers that you have and manage yourself. And the good thing about this particular option from Citrix Cloud, it's evergreen. So when they're doing updates and management and you need new features, there is no more doing upgrades. In fact, a lot of those components are actually maintained automatically for you. The only thing that you have to deploy in your environment is a Citrix Cloud connector, which is just a small little component, and you would put it in every one of the regions where you're going to have some of those workloads. And even those maintained automatically by Citrix for you, and they maintain themselves for updates.
Hey, Al, you're not showing any slides, and we're getting
the
some
slide
notes
did
in.
not proceed?
No.
Okay. Then what happened on Zoom? Good old Zoom. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate that. Okay, do I need to stop Zoom from sharing? And I need to exit the minimized mode. Try share screen number 2 again. All right, now is it sharing?
Yes.
All right, sorry about that, everybody. Hey, there's everybody's pretty picture again. All right, sorry, what I was describing earlier was this. All the components that you have to typically set up, and as soon as you go into Citrix Cloud architecture, everything is going to be maintained for you. So apologize, totally did not catch that. We were not presenting, and I apologize for that. But the whole goal here is to reduce your CAPEX and OPEX costs when it comes to Citrix infrastructure, right? So typically a lot of our customers had to go buy multiple SQL licensing, or they had to set up a lot of these infrastructure components, as we mentioned earlier. Don't have to do that any longer. All that is going to be maintained as a service by Citrix themselves. And this does allow you to migrate to Citrix Cloud at your speed. So that means that when you're ready to migrate to the public, to the Citrix Cloud components, you're ready to go. You do have to do it before the end of the term. So if you sign up for like a 3-year agreement with Citrix and to do a migration from your on-prem to a Citrix Cloud architecture, you do have to kind of make sure that that gets completed before the end of the term. And we definitely help customers do that with our team. It's pretty easy to do. Just take some time and planning, but it's actually not too technical of a complex problem. Okay, so Just want to make sure we have that clear, because that typically comes up as a confusing topic. Is, this does not require you to migrate everything into the cloud. Now, also, I wanted to talk about Microsoft Windows Virtual Desktop, or also known as WVD, and what is that? WVD is a licensing benefit as part of some select Microsoft 365 and OS licensing models that basically Citrix, kind of the same concepts of Citrix, where Microsoft took the management plane, which is the stuff in the middle, and basically is delivering that to you as a service from a customer's perspective. Now, this only runs in Azure. So that means all of the workloads have to run in Azure. And we'll talk about why actually the combination of Citrix and Azure in just a couple of seconds makes the most sense. However, this does exist out there and is something that we commonly come up in conversations with our customers. It's also evergreen. It also is meant to focus on reducing your CAPEX and OPEX costs. One interesting benefit, and you'll see this whether it's Citrix plus Azure or WVD, is really multi-session support for Windows 10, which is an interesting new option, along with Windows 2008 R2 and Windows 7 extended support. Those are both Azure exclusive capabilities. But again, same kind of concept. You can kind of run your workloads, your VDI workloads in Azure. Microsoft will manage the management plane for you and kind of deliver that functionality, okay? But really why we're here is just talking about why the benefit of the two, right? And this architecture is what we're going to be talking about today. It's really the Citrix Cloud on Azure. What we're really kind of talking about is Citrix plus WVD. It's kind of what we're talking about. And we see that as actually benefiting our customers greatly. And the reason why is because we kind of think it's like a superhero team up, right? And when we think of superhero teams, we kind of think of like what's common right now. Snyder Cut, by the way, everybody. We think of like the Justice League, that there's the best of both worlds. What can we do to provide the best functionality and combine the two solutions together? So really what we're doing with Citrix is we're providing the best user experience, best performance and security analytics, best administrative experience for image and application management, and definitely one of the best ways to provide public and hybrid cloud workloads, right? So that's what Citrix is bringing to the team up. Microsoft is going to be bringing the best cloud architecture, right? The best place to run Windows workloads, and we'll be talking about why it's the best place to run Windows workloads today. It's also going to provide the best cloud administrative experience for your Windows admins, right? So again, as you're taking people and taking them from an on-premises deployment and you're bringing them into the public cloud, you want to make sure that they have a pretty common interface. Azure does a very good job of that, as opposed to some of the other providers where you almost have to become a DevOps person from the get-go. Also, Azure has the most amount of global regions than any other cloud provider. So when you start talking about a global organization and running workloads in the right places based upon where the applications are running from, Azure is going to be the best place to do that. And it's really also, more importantly, one of the best ways to leverage your existing Microsoft investments, right? So a lot of organizations have invested in Microsoft infrastructure, the Microsoft licensing stack, the operating system, Office 365. You really want to take advantage of that. Azure is going to be one of the best places that you can perk those workloads, okay? So hopefully we got a decent amount of level set for the conversation today about why it's the combination of the two. And so now we're going to get into the panel format. A couple of things I want to make sure that are out there. I'm going to be starting to monitor the channel. I noticed there's a couple of things that probably are telling me I wasn't sharing my screen. I'll take care of that. But if there's any questions that come up, I'm going to be monitoring the channel as a panelist. Please put your questions in there. We do have some set questions for everybody, for Lauren and for Aaron and for Mike to start talking about and kind of get things going. But hopefully something comes out of it that you guys can think of and kind of get you kind of stimulated into a conversation. Just bring up your question, put it in the chat. We'll see it in the chat as best as I possibly can, as quickly as I can, and I will make sure to get it addressed as soon as I can. All right, so time for the panel. So now let me go ahead and stop sharing. Cool, so we brought everybody back onto the screen now, right? Cool. Hey, Mike, got to show that screen, man. There we go, all right, looking good. All right, so let's go ahead and do some introductions just really quickly. So I'm gonna run through and we'll just kind of throw it to each person. So Aaron, we'll start with you. Just kind of give us a little bit of background and discussion about yourself.
Great. Thanks so much, Al. Thank you, everybody, for joining. My name is Aaron McKay. I'm a cloud solutions architect with Microsoft. I am on the One Commercial Partner team focused in Azure infrastructure, primarily focused in Windows Virtual Desktop workloads, and I help business partners of Microsoft skill up and also build out their new solutions on Windows Virtual Desktop and Azure as a whole for the infrastructure side. So I've been with Microsoft for just over 2 years now. And before that, I was working at IBM as a tech sales engineer and worked for IBM for about 3 years. And before that, I was working for the National Institutes of Health and the IT side. So yeah, happy to answer any questions that come up.
Cool. Sounds good. All right. Let's go, Mike. Mike, do you prefer Mike or Michael? Which one are we going for today?
Either one.
I've heard some other
works.
nicknames. I don't know when I'll talk about them, but Mike, go for it.
Yeah, so Michael Newberger, either one. Been with Citrix for 10 years now. Started out in consulting, did that for 5 years, helping customers, big and small, different industries, deploy Citrix. So a lot of time in the trenches, just like a lot of you. And 5 years ago, I switched over to sales engineering, where I did a stint with our commercial org, so mid-market, and now I've found my way on the enterprise side. So grateful for that Citrix has let me change roles so many times and allowed me to get a diverse experience within the Citrix sphere.
Cool. Thank you very much. Lauren, our famous Lauren Donovan. Go for it.
Yes. So my name is Lauren Donovan. I'm an enterprise architect here with Intesis 360. For those of you that don't know me, I work with a lot of our enterprise and commercial customers. I've helped a lot of customers with their journey to the cloud, whether we're talking about hybrid-based deployments, or really just full, lift and shift. There's been a lot of things that I've seen, and really environments ranging from a few hundred seats up to maybe even a 20,000 seat deployment we recently did within Azure. So I definitely have a lot of experience in this space and glad to be here. And just kind of a fun fact, Mike and I actually joined Citrix the same day. We had the same start date back in July 2011. And, it's great to have him here today and get to work together again.
Cool. Well, thank you to all our panelists. Appreciate your time. So why don't we get started? So Michael, we'll start with you as the first question. So of course, we know basically with everybody working from home or working from anywhere the last year, basically, right? It feels like yesterday. It's ramped up aggressively, right? And I think the short-term question from a lot of customers is this like a short-term thing? Is this going to be a long-term thing? Why is it going to? Do you think it's going to continue? Basically, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, every company's got to find its own way, but I think one common theme I'm seeing across a lot of my customers is it's going to stick around in some capacity, right? So I think COVID, it's an opportunity for an experiment, right, of remote work. I think there's a lot of companies, some on the call today that I've already worked with that already were doing that for specific business units or specific departments and found a lot of success there, but maybe had not prioritized, they might have thought, oh, maybe we can get these same benefits of hybrid work or remote work with these other business units, but might not have, everyone's got a lot on their plate. They might not have prioritized that effort. Some companies, everyone's at a different place in their journey. Some had already been doing this for a large part of their organization, like Citrix. Some had not done it at all. And I think no matter where you are in the journey, this really accelerated that. So it kind of forced everyone to try it out. Let's see, what's it like to work from home? And for some, that was seamless. For example, people already using Azure or any cloud, people already using Citrix Cloud, they were able to ramp up and hit this in stride. And for others, maybe they had other solutions in place. But the point is, everyone had the opportunity to test this out and see how it works for them. And I'm finding that a lot of customers are seeing success, at least with certain parts of the organization. So it's a frequent topic that comes up with my customers. I always want to understand where they are in that journey. And a lot of them think that there's going to be some level of hybrid work going forward.
Cool. Aaron, Lauren?
Yeah, I'll definitely second that. That's something that I've seen because I know when I jumped onto the Windows Virtual Desktop space early on last year, This was pre-COVID. I was trying to find a new area to work in, and Windows Virtual Desktop sounded really interesting to me. And then, 1 month later, COVID happened, and we started receiving so many requests. And I was doing workshops and webinars with, 300 partners at a time virtually, just because they were so interested and needed that virtual work environment for their customers. And it was just a large need, and that need has stayed consistent throughout. I mean, I definitely see that a lot of our partners have understood how Windows Virtual Desktop works, and they find it easy to use and easy to build out that environment. So, most of the requests we get now on our team are, what's new, what's revamped, what are the new opportunities for Windows Virtual Desktop for the future. So I definitely think this space is going to be widely used in multiple industries going forward.
Lauren, anything business related you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I think I obviously echo the sentiments of both Mike and Aaron there as well. But I think, one of the things that we tend to forget about, some of these adjustments to work from home is really how it's impacted employees. Really, when it comes to having separation of work versus home, and how you really create that space for yourself. And so I think a lot of employers have started doing things like mental health days and trying to prevent burnout and things of that nature. But yeah, I think it's definitely here to stay. COVID has changed our lives for the better or worse. And yeah, I think it's definitely here to stay.
Yeah, I definitely have seen organizations start looking at how they kind of even look at hiring. Right now, this is allowing them to hire people in different locations so they can maybe hire the best skill set possible, rather than hiring somebody that's the closest to the office, right? Or making them move, right? I've seen that often. The other one I've seen too is the real estate business, right? Which is, do I need, four floors of a downtown San Francisco or downtown LA building or something like that? Do I really need to have those when maybe I can still get the same productivity for my workers, sometimes even better, if I allow them to work remote and not have to deal with a 2 to 4 hour commute on any given day? So definitely something I think we all expect to be here in some shape or fashion. It's just a matter of, how it becomes more strategic within the business. So that's good. All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I think, if I can make one more comment on that to kind of add on to Lauren and Al, if we got a minute, but
Okay, go on,
yeah, I think it's something that I've just been used to, right? Because, been working I guess I've been in a remote role, what we call at Citrix. It's more of a hybrid role. I do show up to the office once in a while for the past 5 years. So I've kind of, when COVID hit and everyone was forced to work from home, I know it had a lot of impact on a lot of friends. But, for me, it's like I'd already been doing this. So I've already adapted to that flexible work style. And it's been, I guess I'm kind of like a subject matter expert as like a user of the flexible work style. So as different friends, some of them were trying to maintain the same work style they had in the office and bring that home with them, while, the constraints of a physical space were taken away. That really kind of adds to the burnout. So I really think, for those that are still trying to find their feet, it really is important to adapt to that flexible, find your flexible work style. It's not exactly the same as your office work style, but it could be just as productive, if not more productive. And people like that. I think, as a millennial and, Gen Z and every other generation, their expectations for that flexible work style is going to grow. And I think we're really going to see a lot more gig economy workers, contracting work. And, if you want to attract that top talent, and, on the other side, that talent wants a work environment that adapts to their life, not them adapting to, their work life. So finding that blend, I think, is going to grow a lot. And, again, I know there's people on this call, I saw the registration list, that are already doing that, leveraging, stay-at-home moms or anyone that has to stay at home to take care of, an older relative. You're going to want that flexible work that lets you prioritize your personal life, but also kill it at work. And
we had some of our own employees. Yeah, we had some of our own employees move to take care of their parents. We had other ones that rented basically bought an RV and basically traveled the U.S. and worked the entire time. Right, we'd see pictures of them, sitting by a lake one day, and then they have nice beautiful mountain. We were all jealous. I know for sure I was. So, okay, cool. So moving forward, and by the way, I do see that some of the things that are coming into the chat. I know there's a couple technical questions. I will get to those. I just want to get to some of the groundwork for everything we're going to be talking about today. So, Aaron, so we're going to go with this question for you. So we're going to start getting a little technical now. So, from a Microsoft perspective, from Azure, kind of like maybe give us some ideas about why you believe, and why we all believe on the phone, it's why we're all here, why we think Azure is probably one of the better places to be putting, Windows workloads, and specifically VDI workloads too.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that comes to, like, one of the words that come to mind is comprehensive. With Azure, you have all of our different regions across the entire globe that are there for your WVD deployment, so that we can service and have that reach for all of our customers, no matter where they are in the world. That's been, one of the main pushes for Microsoft is empowering every single person on the planet to do more. And I think that resonates a lot with Windows Virtual Desktop, primarily because we're really enabling that workforce to be able to operate and continue work in the face of uncertainty, like right now with COVID. And also, the fact that we have the Azure portal, you have the access to, monitor your workloads, build out your workloads, store your gallery images for your environments and what you want to use for specific needs, depending on who in your workforce is doing what. So if you have the business admin people, they need certain apps to work, you can build out that gallery image and store that there and update those images accordingly, all within Azure in the portal. So I think that's one really important component, along with security. I mean, we've seen a lot of things happen in terms of security in just past few months, for sure. And security is one of the top things that we prioritize. And if the patching is important, and I think that also role-based access control and conditional access is something that's really is important for Windows Virtual Desktop, and that's what we provide through Azure. So yeah, definitely.
Okay. Lauren, got any other things to add on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would echo what Aaron's saying in regards to the security aspect of things. You certainly get a lot more security out of the box with Azure than you would, with an on-premises based solution, for example. You've got MFA with Azure AD, that's, kind of a native functionality. You've got, the ability to detect compromised Active Directory accounts, which you can't do natively on-prem. And then other things like, if there's a brute force against a VM, for example, Security Center can help you really address some of that. The other big thing I would say is probably around the hybrid use benefits. To me, that's a huge one because, from a cost optimization standpoint, that really helps, move things forward in terms of, if you have a software assurance agreement, you can certainly leverage that to save costs on your compute expenses.
Makes sense. And Lauren, I know you have a lot of experience with all the cloud providers, and I know you have some favorites and some ones that you don't like as much. Maybe kind of give your feedback about what you've seen on the Azure experience as an admin.
Yeah, I mean, it's a familiar set of tools, right? So it's PowerShell, it's working within the Microsoft framework. So there's a lot of things that are going to be a lot more familiar if you're a Windows admin. When I look at some of the other cloud providers, it tends to be kind of, in my opinion, more born in the CLI. So if you're comfortable with CLI and you don't really necessarily need a graphical interface to, interact with, I think those can sometimes be more appealing. I see a lot of developers really gravitate towards those options more. But from a Windows perspective, it feels like home. I mean, it's the only way I can, really articulate it.
Makes sense. And so, Lauren, this actually might be a good spot. This was a technical question that came in through the chat, which is a customer has quite a large amount of on-prem SCCM packages and an on-prem SCCM infrastructure. So they were asking kind of like, can they integrate that? How do they integrate that? Maybe just throw out a couple things on that one. Can we address that question?
Yeah, I would actually also want to get Aaron's perspective on this. I know that there is a cloud version that you could have distribution points in Azure as well, but I wouldn't know necessarily the technical details of that since I don't really leverage SCCM on a regular basis. But Aaron, is that something you can add some color to?
Yeah, so I do know that we do use SCCM for a lot of our management for Windows Virtual Desktop. I'm not entirely sure on how to integrate the existing SCCM packages, but that is something worth looking into to integrate that, because I'm sure that's not a rare case.
Yeah, I'm sure, right, if we had a VPN connection between the two environments, it's just another environment, right? So you can use it to build the image. You know, of course, as soon as you start getting into virtual desktops, there's the concept of non-persistent, right? Which is you build it once and then basically you kind of maintain a gold master separately, right? So definitely, I think it can be integrated from an SCCM, even if it's an on-prem SCCM. There might be benefits to migrating to the cloud version.
Right.
But you know, I think the integration point is yes. And then the question is, there might be better ways of improving on it as we start to kind of move into more of that cloud SaaS applications.
Yeah,
Yes.
one thing I would add to that, Al, is really around, you know, when you start looking at automation and DevOps, you know, those types of tools, which Azure has, you know, the image builder, they have a lot of things where they're integrating, you know, Packer and other open source tools into their own products. But, you know, when it comes to really thinking about how we're going to manage images and all of that, the DevOps approach to that is really more of a modern approach, leveraging a lot of different open source tools, for example, whereas SCCM tends to be more of a legacy-based approach. And so the two aren't always congruent with one another. And so there certainly can be some challenges, you know, and I think there could be, to your point, Al, some better ways to possibly achieve some efficiencies there.
Yeah, if the whole idea is lift and shift, right, that just kind of pick everything up and move it into the cloud, that's not necessarily the optimal way of doing it. There might be limitations. I think somebody mentioned in the chat, say, for example, like SCCM might not work with Windows 10 multi-session, right? So that might be a good example of like, hey, yeah, if you just do lift and shift, you're not going to get the full advantage of the solution. So might be better ways. There might be ways to kind of integrate initially, but maybe a better way of doing it in the long run. So cool. All right, so let's keep moving forward. We'll throw this one over to Michael. So, you know, now from a Citrix perspective, right? Why is it that the customer should be looking at the Citrix Cloud architecture and basically using it, you know, for deploying their virtual desktops?
Yeah, so I would look at Citrix Cloud for the same reason I'd look at, you know, Azure or any cloud in the first place, right? You're looking, generally what's motivating you to go to the cloud, your company's looking for agility, flexibility, you know, innovation and faster time to value. You don't want to have the bits sent to you and you have to install it and configure it. You just want to consume it, right? And it's the same way with Citrix Cloud. You know, this gives you time like to focus more on strategic goals or goals that actually help your business users and your business units, not, you know, spending the time to learn how to set this up in Azure, right? So that I would say at a high level, that's like my first thought. But you know, it's also the innovation that we come out with. So with Citrix Cloud, you're going to get quicker access to, or I guess think of it this way. You have your users that are hitting a Windows box, right? And they also have applications installed on it. And, you know, before it was easier to manage these images. We're talking about old ways of doing things, right? You get Microsoft would come out with a Windows platform every few years. It relatively stays pretty stagnant. Yeah, you'll patch it once in a while, but not much innovation happening there. You know, it takes many years for that innovation to get rolled out. You had legacy client apps; those don't get updated too much. You know, so Citrix doesn't need to get upgraded too much, right? We're in that layer in between that operating system and the applications and the users. But you know, now it's different. Like Windows is coming out with updates, you know, a few times a year. Your applications are all kind of SaaS or cloud delivered, so the update cycle there is ridiculously fast. You don't want to have a stagnant piece of Citrix managing your Windows. You want to have Citrix Cloud because that's going to keep pace with the application development cycles, with the Windows operating system development cycles, and even your hardware now, right? It's not just, I buy hardware, I'm not going to think about it for 3 to 5 years whenever it goes end of life or end of warranty. That's constantly updating, and Microsoft is constantly coming out with innovation there, and we don't want to be that bottleneck holding you back from realizing that value. We want you to when Microsoft comes out with, you know, an update to the application, the OS, or now the hardware, right, or the, you know, the cloud, the Azure, we want to be right there in lockstep so you guys can realize the value, and we'll always want to be adding value on top of that. So that's kind of like a high level answer. I don't know which direction we want to take it, but I would say that's my initial take there.
Those are good answers. And Lauren, if you got anything on the technical side that you know is kind of a big differentiator from an on-prem versus a cloud-based deployment, that'd be good to hear.
Yeah, so, you know, what you were talking about earlier, Al, where customers may have multiple different sites, and obviously having to manage each one of those sites, multiple management consoles, all of that. I think one of the things that, you know, Citrix Cloud enables us to do is really have a single pane of glass for managing a lot of different locations and resource locations within Citrix Cloud. So really being able to consolidate and collapse down some of that additional infrastructure that might that a customer may have run in the past.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I think if I asked the question in a poll, there'd be a couple of people who respond in the chat that says, hey, they still have a 4.5 farm sitting around there somewhere, a 4.0 farm sitting out there, right? And whether it was left because of either operating system or just, you know what, we're not going to deal with it right now, we'll deal with it later. And now, you know, 12, 13 years later, they're still dealing with that problem, right? I think another thing, Michael, I guess a good question for you that I've kind of run into, you know, typically when I see when you have an on-prem deployment, right, the data that you have access to and the things that you can do with that data tend to be a little bit limited. As soon as you start going into cloud, there's a lot more analytics and other things that you can do with that kind of data. Maybe you can kind of talk a little bit about that on the Citrix Cloud side.
Yeah, I mean, so we're constantly, you know, I would say Citrix is now, you know, we're a cloud first company, so we're constantly coming out with different ways to help customers realize value. So some of that's our analytics platform, where we can collect information on your, you know, not sensitive information, but kind of access type information or metadata, how your users work, what type of things are they accessing, and we can, you know, we use that data to help, you know, come out with different innovation there. So I don't know if you were asking about our analytics platform or other value add solutions we have for cloud, right? Because, you know, like we said before, we don't want to always lift and shift. We want to use cloud or use this change as an opportunity to do things better, right? So there's specific features and functionality that comes out with Citrix Cloud that's made for cloud, right? Because it doesn't necessarily apply to an on-prem world, but in a cloud world, it does. You know, a good example is our Autoscale, and this probably comes up, you know, will come up a lot in this, you know, this type of panel discussion, but, you know, you might not, if you have dedicated machines running in your data center that are, you're using SCCM to deploy applications, it doesn't matter, you just leave these things powered on, users connect whenever they want. That's one way to operate in your data center, but you might not want to use that same model in the cloud just because the costing and the way you deliver things is a little different. So you're going to want capabilities that let you get that best balance of, you know, that cost optimization. So you're only using what you need and you're using things more intelligently. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that.
Yep. Cool. All right. Sounds good. So just because I always like to address these things, especially with the types of panels that we have, where we have, you know, I'm not going to say it's a co-opetition conversation, right? But the elephant in the room is we probably have some customers that are maybe looking at WVD standalone, right? Maybe they just have a different use case. Maybe they're using it in a scenario where they're going to try to run both side by side, Citrix and WVD. Of course, we want to talk about why the combination of the two, but maybe Aaron, from your perspective, maybe just some of the things that you've seen on the WVD side where you're like, you know what, there might be some limitations on WVD that, you know, that you have to kind of look into.
Definitely, yeah. One thing that I've seen come up with Windows Virtual Desktop and, you know, the different updates that have come through, our partners are fast acting, and there's certain things that they find after doing a deployment that they may see some holes, or it'd be really awesome if we had this capability, or we should really add this in, or we can optimize this. And so we work with a lot of our partners to kind of fill those gaps and really improve Windows Virtual Desktop as a whole. So one thing is optimization for teams. This is something that the Microsoft engineering team has been working on and gradually improving over time. But there's some times where we'll have our partners come through with different optimizations, different user experience improvements that maybe we're a little bit taking a little bit longer to really improve on. So we look to our partners to really help upsell, what we have already, established and created as a brand name of Windows Virtual Desktop. But yeah, so I mean, I think the partnership with Citrix and Microsoft has been huge in the last few months, and different announcements that have come through, especially with regards to advanced monitoring, analytics. These are things that Azure has. At the same time, I think that what Citrix has come up with has really improved the Windows Virtual Desktop experience as a whole.
Cool. Michael, any comments you want to make on that one too, about where you're adding some of those? You've already talked about a couple of them, but maybe there's some other ones you haven't touched on yet, Mike.
Well, yeah, this is another one I think there's a lot, and it's really finding what makes the most sense for the customer. And as a sales engineer, that's what I love to talk about, right? Is find which things appeal to each individual company. But I would say, WVD is a great baseline product, just like RDP was, right? And Microsoft has always provided great baseline products, but there's always been opportunity for Citrix to provide value on top, right? So our focus at Citrix might be different than the focus at Microsoft. So at Citrix, we always focus on end user experience, right? So that end user, security and manageability, right? So the admins and how do we manage this day to day? And just like I would say that was like our 3 value add components with RDP, I think that there are 3 value add categories that we have with WVD. And I think I would be happy to drill into that in separate conversations on which pieces of user experience, like is it the team's optimizations, what part of manageability do we want to talk about, which part of security do we want to talk. But those 3 still apply with WVD. The other 2 that are relatively new that didn't really apply to an RDP world, but definitely apply now, I think is hybrid clouds, right? Because it's rare to find a company that's fully in the cloud, especially a lot of enterprises that had data centers before. You're going to have a mix of data centers usage, Azure usage. You probably have multiple clouds, right? There's probably parts of your environment that are using AWS, GCP, and Citrix is the only solution that can let you manage all that from one console and consume it as a user from one workspace. And I think that's a big value add on top of WVD. And then last, I would say is cost optimization. There's a lot of built-in capabilities that allow you to really save and reduce your Azure consumption costs so that you can gain the benefits of cloud without paying as big of a price tag on it.
Yeah, which we know it can, right, in the long run. So, and there was a question about it's not really a new partnership between Citrix and Microsoft. Actually, it's an ongoing relationship. It just continues to grow. It's actually going back, at least as far back as I remember, like the 1996, 1997 time frame is when they really started partnering together. She goes back to all the way to like NT 351 and even going beyond before that. So the relationship's always been strong. It just always goes through these cycles where like they're strong and then they're kind of like, okay, we're not doing so much together, and then we ramp it back up again. So that's what I've seen as being in this industry for a while. So it's a long-standing relationship. It's definitely at the highest levels of the relationship, and it's something I think I see it's a mutual benefit for both organizations. Aaron, to your point, right, there's some times where you're like, hey, we just want to give you the base functionality. We'll get you working with teams, but as we all know, it's not. I would love to say it's a teams only world, but we know we use other things, right? I mean, I go to another meeting and someone's using another solution. So I got to be able to adapt, and maybe Citrix can add on those functions. Right. So that's good. So Lauren, anything else you want to add on to that in terms of any other enhancements that you've seen?
Yeah, I think the big one, I mean, Mike definitely touched on it around the Autoscale. I think there's actually a new calculator, ROI calculator out on Citrix's website right now that really helps to tell you and explain, here's the cost with WVD alone, here's the cost of WVD plus Citrix. And a lot of the ways we can achieve some of that cost optimization is around the Autoscale capabilities. The other big one I would say in relation to cost optimization as well on Azure is MCS. So MCS leverages some features and capabilities for on-demand provisioning, which allows us to, once the machine's deallocated, the only thing that really remains is the identity disk, which is a very small disk, and then the network interface card. So we're able to, in conjunction with both of those technologies, MCS and Autoscale, we're really able to control the costs, to Mike's point, a lot better within an Azure environment due to that.
Got it. Cool. There's another question that came in around Microsoft Cal licensing server. So yeah, in terms of the Citrix Cloud components, Citrix Cloud is really going to be focusing on the Citrix components themselves. So the Microsoft licensing servers, KMS, the CALs, and everything that would be needed to run the environment, that can remain on premises. It would still be under your managed environment, or you can move that as a VM instance into the public cloud, but you definitely have that control. It's not going to be managed by Citrix themselves. So there was another question that came in. It was talking about, and I'll kind of, maybe this might be for you, Lauren. So if we move our Citrix environment, including the app servers, to Azure, is it possible to automate our app server build depending on resources needed to, I'm assuming, reduce cost on what we don't need when we don't need app servers, and spin them up when we do need more? So maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yes, the short answer to that is yes, absolutely. You can certainly automate that. There are a number of different approaches. I would say probably the most common that I see for something like that specifically is around Packer. So leveraging Packer to actually build out your images. There's a number of different ways you can also install those applications. I see Chocolatey a lot in the DevOps space. I also see just PowerShell scripts themselves performing the installs. So there's a lot of different ways to approach that. But yes, there's certainly, even if you go out on GitHub, there's actually even a lot of things that people have already put out there that can do something similar, out of the box.
Got it. So that'd be for the automation phase. And I think, Mike, you already mentioned like Autoscale, right? So maybe Lauren, talk about Autoscale just briefly again, make sure we got that one clear.
Yeah, for sure. So from Autoscale perspective, you can actually either do a load-based or schedule-based. So you can either tell Autoscale, hey, I have this period of time, I want 80% of my desktops up, or however much you're going to need during that period, or you can actually use a capacity buffer and just make sure that you always have capacity powered on. There's actually a newer feature as well now for dynamic provisioning. So you can essentially create VMs or delete VMs based on your scale up or scale down functionality. So the really important thing to keep in mind with this is we really need to have a good understanding of, when the users are logging in, when do we need desktops available? It becomes a lot more important than with an on-prem type of deployment. So really just having that data, and typically collect that data during the pilot phase of the project, is where I like to really dial that in and make sure we're using the right numbers and the right metrics for that.
Got it. Got it. And yeah, there definitely also, even further, there exists third-party tools to start identifying kind of like how you're consuming the environment. Are you right sizing? Do you have too big of VMs? Do you have too small of VMs? As you move other workloads, like you might be moving SQL databases or application servers into the environment that are not Citrix focused, same thing. You're going to want to know, are those scaled correctly? Do I need more of those? So there's definitely third-party tools that are out there to do that too. All right.
And one thing I would say on that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
No, go for it, Lauren.
So I was just going to say, one thing I'd like to add is, we don't live in the age of, set it and forget it. You can't do that in the cloud for a number of reasons. But to Mike's point, you always want to be taking advantage of the latest innovations. Sometimes that may mean rebuilding part of your environment to take advantage of, let's say, managed disks if you were using unmanaged before. But there's just always a lot of reasons to constantly be looking at that. And we generally recommend our customers, after they've gone to the cloud, really every 6 months to a year, get a cloud health check, make sure that we're saving money where we can, make sure that we're taking advantage of some of those performance optimizations, and just it's a constant process. So we'll never set it and forget it again. So.
And if I could just make one more comment there, I think one of the big value adds with Citrix is cost optimization. Yeah, with first WVD, there is a Citrix license cost, but you make that up and way more with the optimizations we come out with. So that's an area we're going to constantly innovate in. Autoscale is the best example. Only spin up what you need when you need it, so you don't have machines sitting idle consuming cost. But Another example of one we recently came out with is vertical load balancing, right? How you load balance sessions in an on-prem world is different than how you would think about it in a cloud world. And this is just like it's like a one setting you put on your delivery group, but under the hood, it makes sense, right? Like, 'cause if I'm on-prem and I got 10 servers that can accept connections, I'm going to put each 10 user will get their own box, right? I'm going to spread them horizontally. But in a cloud world, I don't want to leave 10 boxes powered on. I'm going to put all 10, I'm going to fill up one box or one VM, and then I'm not going to power on that second VM until the first VM is full. So it's just like all these little configuration options are examples of how we can, help you optimize costs or help you get a better user experience or help you get better security on top of what you already get with the base functionality of Azure or WVD.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would definitely just piggyback and come full circle. I mean, that's a great point because, with Windows Virtual Desktop, you do have scaling options. However, they may be limited versus what Citrix can come up with and add on to that, because we do have breadth versus depth balancing and scaling for Windows Virtual Desktop. So yeah, it's definitely interesting to see how many more advancements we can build together and just continue that partnership.
Yeah, the rate of change in the cloud is exponential, right? So you need to be ready for it and being adapting to that change. And Lauren, to your point about health checks, right? Or just understanding about there's probably going to be a change, if not every month, every couple of months in a lot of these cloud architectures. You need to be prepared for what that impact is going to have. Potentially even what's being deprecated. That's another one that has come up a couple times as things are maybe potentially deprecated and being replaced with a new feature. It used to be in the old days, you just didn't do the upgrade, right? And you're like, hey, as long as I don't do the upgrade, I can still run that old feature. That's not necessarily the way of the cloud. So you have to be a little bit more aware of what's going on. So those are all great topics. Cool. Nothing in the chat, so we're good. Aaron, I'm gonna throw this question to you because it's definitely an Azure question, right? Which is, we have customers that are looking at AWS, they're looking at GCP as alternate locations to run their workloads, right? And we talked a couple of high-level things about why Azure is a good place to run, but maybe just give a little bit on where from a licensing perspective, because I think that's a pretty big deal, especially from our larger customers, about where Azure is going to be the cheapest place to run their Windows workloads.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that's very different about Azure and Microsoft and Windows Virtual Desktop is that most of our customers who already use one of our Microsoft 365 or Enterprise, these licenses already make you eligible for Windows Virtual Desktop. So as long as you have like E3, E5 and above, I mean, you're still eligible and you're able to reap the benefits of using Windows Virtual Desktop and the Windows 10 multi-session capability, which essentially adds more efficiencies to your whole environment. And there's also the fact that you can use reserved instances, because essentially you're just spinning up VMs for those workloads. We have different platforms. You can use Linux, you can use Windows 10, the whole gambit of our environment. So these licenses give you a lot more flexibility with what you want to build out. And I think that as Lauren mentioned earlier, the hybrid use benefit, I mean, that's huge savings there in terms of licensing. So
yeah, we've seen some of our enterprise customers that have maybe already standardized on a competing solution, right, AWS or GCP, now starting to realize it's going to cost them more to run their Windows environment, or even worse, they may not even be able to use Windows functionality, like say, for example, like the RDSH kind of functionality, or even Office 365 access. They may not be able to use it in the competing solution. So there's definitely some complexity there. My suggestion is to anybody, especially anybody that's got an enterprise agreement with Microsoft, we can talk you through that scenario because it's a pretty complex scenario. I like to joke that you almost have to have a degree just in Microsoft licensing, but we do have someone that does. So we actually have someone that does know that kind of stuff, and she's very good at her job. So we can definitely bring that in. So that's good. That was definitely the topic I wanted to address, because it's a big deal that we're seeing with our customers that are looking at other competing solutions. So all right, cool. I'm going to skip the question that we had about technical advantages, because I think we've talked a lot about all the technical advantages already about why we see, Citrix plus Azure kind of being the best road to go down. Kind of want to hear challenges. So maybe think about a challenge that you've seen. So maybe just give me what you think is your biggest challenge that you've seen that your customers are going through, or maybe a pitfall that they've gone through and they need to avoid when they're moving from an on-prem traditional type architecture into a Citrix Cloud plus Azure architecture. So Lauren, I'm going to throw that question over to you first.
Sure. So, I think there's a lot of different things. From a technical perspective, I would say something I see a lot of customers start with is, okay, we've already got a subscription in Azure. We've already, got a place where we can put resources. I'm just going to start putting Citrix resources in the same subscription, with my domain controllers and other infrastructure that I might have up in Azure. And generally speaking, even smaller environments, we actually want to start off with a dedicated subscription. If for nothing else, really, there's a lot of API calls that are tied to the subscription itself that we really want to make sure we're not stepping on other infrastructure when, we're powering on 500 VMs, for example, in a Citrix environment. So, that's something we really want to keep in mind. And I would say also in the larger environments, having multiple subscriptions and understanding the limits. Citrix has limits on both the number of VDAs in a subscription as well as the number of VDAs in a particular resource location. So those are good to be aware of. Those numbers are different, the resource location numbers between multi-session and single session. So a lot of larger deployments will see a separation of like the VDI resources from the RDSH type of resources. And then finally, really around the multiple subscriptions, we see a lot of larger customers really needing that, but it can create some interesting challenges when it comes to, okay, now I need my image in multiple subscriptions or multiple regions. And there definitely are some challenges to that in having to provide some level of automation to either script that via PowerShell or leverage, some other DevOps or automation to recreate that image in other locations.
That's good. Cool. Mike, I'll throw that over to you. Where are you seeing from your customers is something that you need to recommend they avoid?
I would say it's similar to what Lauren is saying, but maybe zoomed out a little bit. So I guess less technical, but I think it's the concept of lift and shift, right? Like, I think just because you do something a certain way in your data center and you've done that for years or decades or however long doesn't mean that's how it should be done in the cloud. I think the cloud is an opportunity to rethink the way you do things and do things differently. Don't just kind of run into it head first, like, oh, I'm getting this cloud initiative push from above, or, I'm just going to kind of lift and shift, right? Move just take all my servers, all my desktops, my Citrix on-prem infrastructure and put in the cloud. I think that's, those projects don't generally go as successfully, or you learn later on, I have to do things a little differently. Similar, like, if I were to move out of my San Francisco apartment, right, and move into a home in the surrounding area, I don't want to just take all my same crap, put it in boxes and then unpack it and put it in the house in the same way, right? I want to rethink, does this make sense in my new house? Some of it will, let's bring it. Some of it won't, so let's toss it. Or maybe let me repurpose it. There's also that part of like some areas where it's like, I like how I do it here on-prem or in my old house. Let me rethink how I can use this or take advantage of moving forward. So don't rush into it like head first and just think, oh, I'm just going to do it the same way. I would say, put some thought into it. And, we at Citrix, Microsoft, and Ensysys are happy to have these conversations and, share insights of what we're seeing from other customers so that you guys can have conviction as you move forward with your cloud journey and have it be a successful environment or deployment for your users, your security team, your management, and whoever the stakeholders are. We want this to be successful for them, and that might not happen in a lift and shift approach.
Makes sense.
Or maybe
any other
let's
follow-up?
talk about it.
Yeah, definitely just want to piggyback on what Michael said. You definitely want to understand your requirements, understand the strategy to build out that journey, because it is a journey. It's an ongoing process. So it's going to evolve and change as you mature in that cloud space. So, understand your requirements and have growth in mind, and definitely start small, fail fast.
Yeah. Yeah, another one I'll throw out there too. This is a little bit on the more of the operational side is kind of, it's a different mindset, right? In terms of as you're going to the cloud, where troubleshooting may not be the same way you do the troubleshooting before. You don't have access to the underlying hypervisors or the networking stack, right? So finding either tools or methodology or training your help desk to understand, like, here's what you have access to and here's what you don't, right? That's a pretty big one. Kind of like that day two operational perspective, like having that understanding of those tool sets where, you know, Citrix, you guys add on quite a bit of those day two operational functionalities. But even then, you know, there might be some third parties that they may have to go look at for later on, or just even training, teach the help desk how to log into Azure portal to figure out why is your VM not powering up correctly or whatever it happens to be. So there's definitely some things there. All right, so as we're getting close, I don't see anything in the chat, so we'll finish up with kind of just maybe like next steps, right? So if you had to pick on like a next step, and we'll start actually with start with Aaron. We'll start infrastructure up, right? So we'll start with Aaron first. What would be like one step you would recommend to a customer, as you know, they haven't started their journey yet? Just high level, what would you recommend they start doing?
Definitely, if they haven't started their journey, if they're kind of just interested in Windows Virtual Desktop as a viable option for their organization, then try to speak with a representative of Microsoft in the Azure infrastructure space. Talk to a partner development manager if you're thinking of partnering with Microsoft as a whole, and they'll definitely help bridge those knowledge gaps and bring in the right technical folks who need to come in. We also have a lot of resources out on the docs, Microsoft Docs, and we keep a what's new WVD doc page up to date month to month. We share out what's new with WVD, what kind of advancements we've had, and yeah, I'd say that's the kind of first place to start is fill in some knowledge gaps. We have Microsoft Learn. The resources are out there. Definitely make use of those.
Cool. Mike, we'll throw it to you next.
Yeah, similar advice that Aaron says. I would say speak to a trusted advisor, right, or a partner, whoever it makes sense, right? So the Citrix account team, we're happy to talk as you guys start to consider Azure, AWS, any cloud. You know, we're happy to help consult and talk through what the requirements are and help you pick the best path forward. So I'd say get with your Citrix account team so they can really dial this into a conversation that's more specific to you. Yeah. And then I guess similar in terms of content, I know we have test drives that come out every few months or so. I think that's a good free way to kind of get some hands-on experience. Hands-on experience. So yeah, tell your account team that you're interested. Let me know next time the next hands-on workshop or test drive comes out.
Laura, you want to wrap it up on that one, on that question?
Yeah, I mean, just to reiterate kind of what the guys are saying, it's really don't do it alone. We've all been down this path before. We've worked with a lot of different customers and, helping them get to the cloud. And we've got a lot of experiences to share that can really help you be successful in your cloud journey. So let us know how we can help here at Intersys 360. We're here to support you in that. And yeah, that's about it.
Yep. Yeah, I think the common one I hear is the cloud is it's not an if, it's just a matter of when, right?
Yep.
I think every time I've talked to a customer, they're like, we don't have a strategy to get to the cloud. And then I'm like, okay, so you need one because it's going to have to happen. And if you don't think you need one, you're probably already using SaaS-based applications. You're already using Office 365. You're doing DR as a service or backup as a service. So you're technically using it. You're just not making it part of your core infrastructure. You're just using it as more of the as a service options. So yeah, making sure that you have a good plan and understanding. Education is super important, as Aaron and Michael was saying, of understanding what's out there. Focusing and working with partners that can kind of come in and talk about the full stack from top to bottom and kind of show you where, there might be some things that you just have never seen before because you haven't done it. And hopefully a company like Intersys 360 will be able to come in, show you what we can do and show off, the benefits of using Citrix and Microsoft together. So no, nothing else came in through the chat. Aaron, Mike, Lauren, thank you very much. Totally appreciate your time. It was really good to have you guys on the panel, and I think we are done for the day. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Everyone have a great day.
right,
Thank you
thank
again,
you.
everybody. Thanks for joining.
All right,
Thanks,
take
guys.
care.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good one.
See ya.